When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I'd lucked out. The rent was cheap, the place was clean, and the landlord seemed normal enough. It had 2 bedrooms, though I only needed one. The second one, I figured, could be a storage room, boxes, spare furniture, that sort of thing. It was small. The paint on the walls had that old, yellowed look, and the window faced the narrow alley between my building and the one next door. Not much light came in, even during the day. There was something about that room I didn't like. Not in a haunted way. Just, the air felt heavier in there. You know how some rooms just seem colder, quieter than they should be? I told myself it was just the lack of sunlight. About a week after moving in, I noticed the second bedroom door was half open one morning. I was sure I'd left it shut. It stuck halfway when you tried to open it, the swollen wood catching against the frame, so it wasn't a door you opened by accident. I thought maybe I'd just forgotten. Then my cat, Molly, started acting strange. At night, she'd sit in the hallway and stare at the door. Not her usual curious stare, this was unblinking, ears slightly back, like she was listening. Once, when I tried to pick her up and carry her into the room, she dug her claws into my shirt and hissed. She'd never done that before. One night, about 3 weeks in, I woke up suddenly. No dream, no sound, just awake. The air was cold, and I realized I was holding my breath. I lay still, straining to listen. And that's when I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. Slow, deep, measured. It was coming from down the hall. I told myself it was the fridge cycling, or maybe one of the neighbors. Still, I locked my bedroom door for the first time that night. A month after moving in, I came home from work and saw something that stopped me cold. The second bedroom door was shut. Completely shut. I never shut it all the way, remember, the frame was warped. You had to pull hard to make it close. And yet there it was. I touched the knob. It was ice cold. When I pushed the door open, the room was empty. Everything exactly where I'd left it, stacks of boxes, an old chair, a lamp without a shade. But the window was unlocked. I never unlocked that window. That night, I shoved a chair under the doorknob. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to a thud. Then the slow scrape of wood against wood. The chair. Something was pushing it from the other side. When I checked in the morning, the door was wide open. The chair was back against the wall, neatly pushed in, like someone wanted it to look undisturbed. That was the first time I thought seriously about leaving. I bought a cheap motion camera and set it up in the hallway, facing the door. The next night, I checked the footage. At 2:46 a.m., the camera caught the door slowly opening. No one visible. It just opened. And it stayed that way for the rest of the night. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was 3 a.m. An unknown number. It was a photo. Of me. Asleep in bed. Taken from inside my bedroom. I called the police. They searched the apartment, checked the windows, questioned the neighbors. No forced entry, no footprints, no fingerprints. The officer asked if I had a roommate. I said no. They left without answers. Over the next week, I noticed other things. My shoes moved from the front door to the kitchen overnight. A glass I hadn't used was sitting in the sink. Once, the shower curtain was drawn shut. I never leave it that way. I bought new locks. 2 days later, I came home and found the second bedroom door open again. On the floor just inside was a small pile of coins, old ones, tarnished, like they'd been in someone's pocket for decades. I'd just gotten into bed when I heard it, the breathing again. Only this time, it was louder. Closer. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it down the hallway. The second bedroom door was open. And in the dark, I saw a figure. A man. Standing perfectly still, facing me. His head tilted slightly, like he was curious. I couldn't see his face, just the outline of his shoulders and the glint of his eyes catching the light. I dropped the phone. When I picked it back up, the doorway was empty. That was it for me. I started packing the next day. When I took one last look inside the second bedroom, the walls were bare except for one spot in the far corner. The paint there was worn away, down to the plaster. It was about the height of a person's forehead. And there were dozens of them. Even shallow indentations. Like someone had been pressing their head against the wall. Over and over. 4 years. I left that day and never went back. The landlord called a week later to ask why I'd moved out so suddenly. When I told him, there was a pause on the line. Then he said quietly, You kept the door closed, didn't you?
I left the restaurant later than I meant to. It wasn't anything fancy, just a little Italian place my friends and I liked because it was cheap, quiet, and didn't mind us staying for hours. We'd been there since 7. By the time we hugged goodbye, it was just past midnight. The air was cold enough that I could see my breath. I walked alone. It was only 10 minutes to my house, and I'd done the walk 100 times before. 2 blocks in, I noticed the sound of footsteps. They weren't loud, but they matched mine. When I slowed, they slowed. When I sped up, they sped up. I told myself it was nothing, just someone going the same way. But when I glanced over my shoulder, I saw him, hood up, hands in his pockets, about 30 feet behind me. I took the long way home, turning down streets I didn't usually take. He followed every turn. By the time I reached my house, my heart was hammering. I unlocked the door fast, slipped inside, locked it again, and peeked out the window. He was there, across the street, just standing. I pulled the curtains shut and told myself, he'll leave. I made tea, scrolled my phone, tried to calm down. Around 1:30 a.m., I went to bed. At some point, I woke up in the dark with a strange feeling. Not a noise, not a dream, just that someone feeling. I lay still, straining my ears, and then I heard it, slow, steady breathing. Not mine. It was coming from the hall. I didn't move. I just stared at the shadowy shape of my bedroom door until I fell asleep again. The next morning, I went to make coffee. My favorite mug wasn't where I'd left it. I found it in the sink, which was odd, because I hadn't used it since yesterday morning. I shrugged it off. Maybe I'd just forgotten. But over the next few days, more little things felt off. A kitchen chair not pushed in. A sweater I'd worn still damp from the wash even though I hadn't done laundry. The faint smell of cigarette smoke in the hallway. I don't smoke. 5 days later, I came home from work and noticed my bedroom window was locked from the inside. I never lock that window. Sticks badly, and I have to force it open. And yet, there it was, locked tight. That night, the breathing came again. I told myself it was the pipes. But pipes don't whisper. It was so faint, I thought I imagined it at first. A voice. Just one word. Shoo. I sat up, heart in my throat. I turned on my bedside lamp. The hall was empty. I started double-locking the front door and wedging a chair under my bedroom knob. The following morning, the chair was neatly back at my desk. A week in, the smell got stronger. That sour, damp smell like wet clothes shut in a bag. It seemed to be coming from the vents. And from the second bedroom, the one I never used. I didn't even like opening that door. It was colder in there. Still, the night everything changed, I woke up to my phone buzzing. It was 3:12 a.m. A text from an unknown number. It was a photograph of me, asleep, taken from inside my bedroom. I called 911. 2 officers came, searched every corner. No signs of forced entry, one of them said. They asked if I lived alone. I said yes. Before they left, one suggested maybe it was a prank. I knew it wasn't. That night, I heard scratching in the walls. Not like mice, heavier, slower, like someone dragging their fingernails just under the plaster. It stopped around 4 a.m. The next day, I came home and saw my bedroom door wide open. Sitting on the pillow was my toothbrush, wet. I didn't plan to sleep there again. I packed a bag, left it by the door, and told myself I'd go to my sister's first thing in the morning. Around 2:45 a.m., I woke up. The breathing was back. Only this time it was right beside my bed. I turned over slowly. In the dark, I saw the outline of someone crouched low. He didn't move, didn't speak, just breathed. I must have passed out from fear because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The bag by the door was gone. So was my phone. On the nightstand was a scrap of paper. My handwriting. I don't remember writing it. It just said, "Stop locking the door."
I kept walking. I didn't look back again. There's something about turning around too often that makes you feel like prey. I told myself I'd take the usual route home, a straight shot for about 5 blocks, then a left, then another 3 until I reached my street. Well lit, familiar, safe. At least, it's supposed to feel safe. The figure behind me stayed in my peripheral reflection whenever I passed a window or the glossy side of a parked car. Always the same distance. When I stopped at a crosswalk, they stopped too, not close enough to be awkward, but close enough that I could hear their shoes scuff on the damp concrete. A slow, deliberate drag. I crossed when the light changed, walked faster, tried to focus on the rhythm of my own steps. I passed the late-night pharmacy, lights still on, a bored-looking cashier behind the counter. For a second, I thought about ducking in, buying a pack of gum just to see if the person would pass me by. But that felt ridiculous. They'd think I was paranoid. Maybe I was. 2 blocks later, I knew I wasn't. The street opened into a quieter stretch. Fewer shops, more shuttered doorways. The only light came from a single street lamp ahead, its bulb buzzing faintly. As I stepped into its circle of light, I could hear it, a second pair of footsteps, matching mine almost perfectly. The moment I slowed, they slowed. The moment I sped up, they did too. I didn't turn around. Not yet. Instead, I took the next left, not my usual turn, but a small side street that looped back toward my route. If they were just coincidentally going the same way, this would break it. It didn't. The sound of their steps followed me into the narrower street, where the buildings pressed closer together and the light was weaker. My shadow stretched long in front of me. Behind, faint but visible, was another shadow. I finally looked. The figure was taller than me, shoulders hunched slightly. The hood of their jacket was up, shadowing their face. They didn't falter when I made eye contact, they just kept walking, same pace, same distance. I turned back around quickly, my chest tightening. The street curved, and for a moment I lost sight of them. I used that moment to duck into a recessed doorway between 2 buildings. My breath sounded too loud in my ears. I waited. The street was silent. Then the steps came again. Slower now. They didn't pass. They stopped. Right outside my hiding place. I pressed myself against the cold brick, eyes on the sliver of sidewalk I could see. The tip of a black shoe appeared, unmoving, like they were listening. A car passed at the far end of the street, its headlights briefly sweeping across the pavement. In that flicker of light, the shoe shifted. And then they kept walking. I waited until the sound faded completely before I stepped back out, my legs shaky. I told myself I'd circle back toward the main road, stick to lit areas until I was home. I didn't see them again for another 10 minutes. I almost convinced myself I'd been imagining the whole thing. But then, as I passed the laundromat on the corner of my block, I saw it in the reflection of its big front window, a dark shape standing at the opposite corner, still as a statue. Facing me. I didn't turn my head. I didn't run. I walked straight to my building, keys in hand, my mouth dry. The front door was heavy, the kind that takes both hands to pull. I stepped inside, let it close behind me, and went straight to the stairwell. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. I didn't use the elevator. I couldn't stand the idea of being trapped in that small metal box, knowing they could follow me in. I made it to my door, slipped inside, and locked it. Deadbolt, chain, the whole thing. I didn't go to the window right away. I didn't want to know. But after a few minutes, I couldn't help it. I pulled the curtain back just an inch. Down on the sidewalk, directly across the street, under the broken street lamp, someone was standing perfectly still. Facing my building. They stayed there for hours. And that was the first night. They stayed there until the sky started turning pale. I watched from behind the curtain, barely moving, my legs aching from standing so long. I told myself they couldn't see me, the lights were off, the window small, but every time their head tilted, just slightly, I had the sickening thought that they were matching the exact spot where I stood. When a garbage truck finally rumbled down the street, they stepped back into the shadow of the building and vanished. I didn't see where they went. That whole day, I barely moved from my apartment. I told myself I was being paranoid, but the thought of walking outside made my skin crawl. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, I froze. By the time evening came, I'd convinced myself it was over. Maybe they lived nearby. Maybe they'd just happened to stop on that corner. It was ridiculous to think someone would stand outside a stranger's building all night, wasn't it? But at 11:47 p.m., I heard something. Not from the street, from inside. A soft, deliberate knock on my door. 3 taps. Then silence. I didn't move. The peephole shows almost nothing in my building, just the opposite wall of the hallway. I stared through it anyway, my breath fogging the glass. No one was there. I backed away slowly. I didn't sleep that night. Every small sound seemed louder, the pipes, the wind, a door creaking somewhere down the hall. I kept telling myself not to look out the window again. At 3:12 a.m., I looked. They were back. Same spot on the sidewalk. Same stillness. I watched until my eyes burned. Around 4, I thought I saw a second figure farther down the street, but it might have been a trick of the light. By dawn, both were gone. The next night, I stayed at a friend's apartment across the city. I didn't tell them why, just said I didn't feel like going home. But even there, even in the safety of their warm little living room, I kept glancing toward the window. I half expected to see that same shape in the distance. When I finally went back to my place 2 days later, the first thing I noticed was the envelope under my door. No name. No address. Inside was a single photograph. It was me. Taken from behind. Walking home. My coat collar turned up, my hair catching the light from a street lamp. There was no note. I didn't call the police. I should have. But what would I even say? Someone followed me and now I have a picture. They'd ask for proof, for a face, for something other than my own fear. That night, I slept with the TV on. I woke up twice, once to the sound of the floorboards creaking just outside my bedroom door, once to the faintest scrape of something against my window. I didn't get up either time. 3 nights later, I woke up at 2:37 a.m. with the unshakable feeling that someone was in the apartment. I stayed still, barely breathing, straining to hear anything. From the living room, there was the soft click of my front door closing. I didn't move until sunrise. When I finally got up, everything looked normal. No signs of a break-in. Nothing missing. Except the photograph. It was gone. For the next week, I lived in a strange half-life. I still went to work, still bought groceries, still smiled when a neighbor said hello, but every moment outside felt like walking under a microscope. I'd catch shapes in my peripheral vision. Sometimes it was just someone lighting a cigarette, sometimes a reflection in a shop window. I told myself it wasn't them. But deep down, I knew. I started locking the chain even when I was inside during the day. I put a chair under the door handle at night. I kept the curtains closed. And still, every night around 3 a.m., I'd wake up without knowing why. Sometimes I'd hear something faint, the creak of the stairs, the softest scrape along the wall. Sometimes there was nothing at all, except the certainty that they were nearby. The night it happened, it was raining. Hard. The kind of rain that drowns out all the city noise. I remember thinking maybe it would keep them away. At 12:41 a.m., I was half asleep when the power went out. No streetlight glow through the curtains. No hum from the fridge. Just darkness and the sound of rain hammering the windows. I lay there, listening. And then I heard it, the faint crunch of wet shoes on my hallway carpet. Slow. Deliberate. My phone was on the nightstand. I reached for it, my hands shaking, and dialed 911 without even unlocking the screen. But the line didn't connect. No service. The steps stopped outside my bedroom door. I didn't move. My heart was so loud I was sure they could hear it. The door didn't open. There was no knock. Just breathing. Low. Steady. Then, so close it felt like it was right at my ear, a whisper. You walk too fast when you're scared. The steps moved away. Slowly. I stayed in bed until daylight came through the curtains. When I finally got up, my front door was locked. The chair was still under the handle. And on the floor, just inside the door, was the photograph. Only this time, I was facing the camera. Smiling.